They mocked her, said the white dress she wore looked like a cheap tablecloth. They humiliated her when she dared to raise her paddle, scoffing that someone like her couldn't possibly afford to play in a millionaire's game. But what they didn't know was that the very woman they dismissed had painted the masterpieces they were now fighting over. Blankets of white snow draped the winding roads, curling around the Tyrolean Alps in Austria, reflecting the shimmering lights of a glass building perched against the biting winter air. That building, Lehrholm Auctioneers, wasn't a place for ordinary people. It was a playground for tycoons, royalty, and those who carried in their pockets the invisible currency to place a price on beauty itself. Among custom-tailored tuxedos from Milan and gowns heavy with diamonds, a quiet woman stepped through the grand entrance. She needed no welcome, no camera flashes, no murmurs of admiration. She needed only one thing: to stand before that painting. Amara Leigh, 33, carried no branded purse, wore no jewelry. Her dark brown hair was pinned loosely at the nape of her neck, her sun-kissed skin a quiet contrast against the soft white silk of her unbranded gown. In her hand she held a small paddle, its number printed plainly without flourish. No one noticed her at first, like a pebble lost among marble tiles. But somehow her stillness unsettled them. She stopped before Whispers at Dawn, an unsigned painting, mounted at the center of the auction hall. Blues, golds, and violets swirled together like breath caught on canvas, colors not just painted, but felt. She looked at it the way someone listens to a familiar piece of music. Not as a collector would, but as someone who had once lived inside. Its frame, a voice behind her sliced through the moment. "Sweetheart, that dress looks like it came off a third-rate Italian restaurant table." The tone was sharp, German, laced with aristocratic disdain. His silver hair slicked back, silk tie in burnt brown. Victor Holtz, steel magnate with a net worth of over 4 billion euros, smirked at her like she was a badly written joke. "You sure you're not looking for the free gallery down the street?" Amara didn't answer. She didn't even flinch. Her eyes remained on the painting. Then came perfume, thick, expensive, and a cluster of women gliding forward like wolves in silk. Among them, Countess Marianne de Fontaine held up her phone, muttering, "One quick selfie with the masterpiece, but crop out the stray in the white dress, please." The giggles that followed were soft but sharp, like thin blades against bare skin. Amara took a step back, quietly, not in retreat and not in shame, just a silent motion, eyes still tethered to the canvas. She moved to the last row of seats, where the spotlight no longer reached. A young attendant in a black bow tie approached, leaned down, and said just loud enough for those nearby to hear, "Miss, VIP seats are at the front. This section is for special invitees only." Amara nodded, said nothing, and sat, without protest, without defense. Then came the bell. The auction began. The silver-haired auctioneer tapped the gavel on the wooden podium. One masterpiece after another appeared on screen. Klimt, Kandinsky, even a rare sketch by Monet. Each name met with offers of tens of millions, flung like high-stakes poker chips. When Whispers at Dawn appeared, the room inhaled. Opening bid: 10 million euros. Victor's hand shot up instantly, then Marianne's, then a Qatari prince. The numbers climbed: 12, 15, 18 million. The auctioneer beat a rhythm with his gavel, his eyes flicking between raised paddles and the tablet in front of him. At the back of the room, Amara's fingers tightened slightly on the paddle in her lap. When the bid reached 20 million, whispers began to ripple across the room. A woman in crimson leaned toward her friend, voice low and biting. "She's still here? God, has she no shame?" A young man with tousled curls laughed. "Can't wait to see if she lifts that paddle. Maybe she thinks wishing hard enough fills your bank account." Laughter crackled across the room like wildfire through dry forest. And then, Amara raised her paddle. The room seemed to freeze in a single breath. Paddle number 143 trembled faintly in the glow of the crystal chandelier as Amara Leigh raised it. Heads turned sharply. Diamond-studded eyes blinked in disbelief. And then, laughter erupted, sharp, and echoing like fireworks in a grand ballroom. "Oh my God, is she serious?" giggled Sasha Bell, a model and arm-candy wife of a tech tycoon, her Cartier necklace bouncing with each shake of amusement. Adorable. The girl in the white dress, dreaming with an empty bank account. Another voice chimed in. Clara Lint, owner of a gallery chain in Berlin, leaning forward just enough for half a dozen people to hear. "This is an auction, not a charity raffle, darling." Victor Holtz didn't bother hiding his disdain. He waved toward security, his voice dripping with faux concern. "I believe we have an intruder, possibly a waitress sneaking in for a free glass of champagne." Laughter rippled outward like a mocking tide. Phones went up, streams went live, tweets fired off. Within minutes, Amara Leigh and the image of a woman in a white gown, seated in the back row holding up a paddle, flooded the internet with hashtags like auction fail, who is she, and she fake it till you get thrown out. The auctioneer, Lorenzo Mays, held his gavel firmly, his face still composed, though the corner of his mouth sagged slightly. He looked down at the tablet in front of him. The ridicule buzzing in the air made him uneasy, but he pressed on. "We're currently at 20 million euros. Do I hear another bid?" Amara said nothing. She kept her paddle raised, unwavering, her back straight. She didn't flinch at the cruel voices that swarmed her from every direction. Her eyes, deep, clear, and unfazed, remained fixed on the painting, as if the rest of the world were nothing more than background noise in a film. She didn't star in. Another young staffer approached, crouching beside her, his whisper sharper than the rest. "Miss, if you're not bidding seriously, I'll have to ask you to leave the auction floor." And then, from the front row, came the unmistakable voice of Diana Voss, renowned art critic, nicknamed the Dagger Queen. She spoke as if drafting a headline. "An amateur desecrates the cathedral of art. Perfect fodder for tomorrow's culture column." More laughter. Someone behind her mimicked a voice. Maybe she should stick to embroidering handkerchiefs on Etsy instead of crashing million-euro auctions. Amara stayed seated. Her shoulders never trembled. Her lips never curled in response. But her grip on the paddle had tightened. Just slightly, just enough to betray a battle happening within, invisible to those around her. Somewhere in the back, a man growled, "Call security." "She's making a scene." And for the first time since she entered the room, Amara's gaze broke away from the painting. She turned her head and looked directly at Lorenzo Mays, not apologetically, not defiantly, just a slow, measured nod, a signal already long decided. And then, the unexpected happened. Lorenzo touched the earpiece hidden behind his hair, his brow creasing. The chatter in the room began to still, like a symphony halted mid-note. He stepped away from the mic, whispered briefly with someone backstage, and returned to the podium. When he spoke again, his voice no longer carried the confidence of routine, but something more cautious and stunned. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, his eyes sweeping across a room now utterly silent, "I've just received an official request from the creator of Whispers at Dawn. That request is to withdraw the painting from auction. Permanently." The air cracked open in silent shock. Marianne dropped her feathered fan. Victor's hand shook, tipping his glass of red wine. Clara Lint gaped. And then, like some invisible force rearranging the room, every light dimmed except one. A single spotlight fell, clean and golden, directly on Amara. She stood. Her white dress flowed like liquid silk. No one spoke. She walked toward the front, step by step. No haste, no hesitation. And for the first time, the entire room looked at her, not as a joke, but as if suddenly they realized they were standing in the presence of someone they had failed to see. Under the solitary spotlight cascading from the crystal chandelier, Amara Leigh walked slowly between rows of frozen seats, leaving behind the laughter that once mocked her and the stares that tried to shrink her. Each step she took seemed to tear through the veil separating a world blinded by wealth from a truth it wasn't ready to face. She stopped at the auction podium. Lorenzo Mays, the auctioneer, instinctively stepped aside, as if something greater than protocol compelled him to make way. Amara set her paddle down on the wooden stand, lifted her head, and swept her hazel gaze across the room. No more laughter. No phones raised, just stiff faces and restless hands crumpling satin hems. "My name is Amara Leigh," she said, her voice not loud, but every word was a blade slicing through the thick air of pretense. "And I am the one who painted Whispers." At dawn, a silence dropped over the room like the oxygen had been stolen from it. Victor staggered back a step. Sasha's mouth hung open, frozen. Clara whispered, "No, it can't be." But Amara wasn't finished. From the pocket of her gown, she pulled out a folded document and held it high for all to see. A certificate of authenticity, stamped by an international board of curators and signed by the late mentor who had once protected her anonymity. "I painted this piece in the freezing kitchen of a shelter in Ljubljana," she continued. "Using leftover paint I begged from a bankrupt art supply store, on canvas donated by a retired art teacher." She paused. A few scattered breaths caught in throats around the room. "You just bid 20 million euros for something that was once tossed aside like trash," Amara said, her expression calm, almost tender. "But now I've bought it back, for €1. She lifted the certificate and tore it in half. The sound cracked through the hall like a slap. The paper floated gently to the marble floor, and with it fell the illusion of ownership, the false authority they had clung to so tightly. "From this day forward," Amara said, steady and clear, "I will never sell my art to those who hang paintings just to show off a balance sheet. The rest of my works, 42 pieces, will be displayed permanently and freely in the orphanage where I grew up." A faint exhale echoed from the back of the room. No one knew whose it was. Chairs shifted, eyes dropped. Victor lowered, his head, the veins on his hand twitching. Marianne murmured, "What have we done?" But Amara didn't look at them. She didn't seek forgiveness. She didn't ask to be understood. She turned from the podium and walked past the painting, not stopping, not touching, as if Whispers at Dawn wasn't a trophy, but a farewell. Near the tall glass doors that led outside, she paused. She didn't turn back. She didn't raise her voice. She simply spoke, soft as a breeze, yet powerful enough to etch itself into the memory of everyone who once thought she was nothing. "Art isn't a price tag," she whispered. "It's a pulse." The doors opened. Night air rushed, in carrying with it the light and shreds of pride that had just been torn apart. Amara Leigh stepped out, her silhouette fading into the white snow. Behind her, the auction room stood silent as stone, where the people who once laughed now had nothing left to do but watch the woman they tried to erase from the room walk straight into history. The news exploded before Amara could even leave the town. Within 8 hours, videos of her standing beneath the spotlight, tearing up the certificate of a €20 million painting, had flooded every platform. "The woman they laughed at is the genius they couldn't afford." That headline appeared on the front pages of The Guardian, Le Monde, The New York Times. The media dubbed her the silent disruptor, an anonymous artist who shattered the mask of the ultra-rich. The photos. Amara stood in the glow of the lights, her plain white dress shimmering like fractured moonlight. Her eyes showed no anger, no defiance, only calm. And it was that calmness that shook the world to its core. Journalists dug into her background. Raised in an orphanage in Marseille, she taught herself to paint using old books salvaged from public libraries. An elderly patron had helped her sell her works anonymously for years, until he passed away last spring. No one had known who she was, but her paintings had quietly found their way into the world. One in the office of a tech CEO in Batiwen, Tokyo, another in the private art vault of a Dubai prince, and a third in a tucked-away London gallery. All were purchased without knowing the name behind the brush. Now, those pieces had become priceless. Collectors scrambled to find her, Major museums, from the Louvre to MoMA, sent formal requests to borrow her work. One unnamed queen, reportedly, offered €1 billion for a single piece. Amara never responded. Meanwhile, those who had once mocked her began to feel the storm of consequences. Victor Holtz's company lost 17% of its stock value within 3 days of the auction. An old livestream clip of him ridiculing Amara's dress and calling her a party crasher was shared millions of times. The public turned on him. Business partners backed out. Media outlets labeled him a symbol of vulgar elitism. Marianne Dufontaine was banned from 3 major art events that year after an audio recording of her threatening to call security because Amara had blocked her frame aired on French television. The hashtag #CancelMarianne swept across Twitter like a blizzard. Her Instagram lost nearly 800,000 followers in 1 week. Clara Lint was forced to shutter 2 of her galleries. Young artists withdrew their works from her exhibitions en masse, calling her behavior at the auction an insult to real art. Sacha Bell, the one who mocked Amara for coming for free champagne, had her sponsorships terminated by 3 major fashion brands. No label wanted to be associated with the arrogance now condemned by millions. A video of her awkwardly fumbling through an interview about Amara turned into a viral meme. I didn't know she was, actually important, and Diana Voss, the sharp-tongued critic who once claimed Amara was only worthy of a TikTok biography, submitted a book manuscript about the auction to 4 publishers. All declined. One even replied, "No one wants to read a confession from someone who once kicked a woman already on the ground." Amara said nothing. No statements, no social media posts, no rebuttals. Reporters camped outside the orphanage in Marseille, where she now lived, teaching watercolor to children who, like her, had once been forgotten. A leaked photo of her in a white shirt and worn jeans, laughing with paint on her hands in a classroom, became a new symbol. People no longer referred to Whispers at Dawn as just a painting. They called it an act of justice. The free gallery she funded was built quickly next to the orphanage. No tickets, no velvet ropes, just walls breathing with her work. Raw, emotional, and as real as the ground beneath their feet. Thousands lined up from around the world just to see them, but Amara did not attend the opening. She stayed in class, painting with the children in quiet joy. When asked why she had turned down billions, turned down fame, she gave one answer, just one sentence that made the whole world pause. "I don't paint to be bought. I paint so the unheard can see themselves." The gallery in Marseille opened on a bright sunlit morning. There was no red carpet, no paparazzi, no sweeping violin as in other glittering art events. Instead, thousands stood quietly in line along the old cobblestone street. Schoolchildren, bundled in coats, elderly couples leaning on canes, young lovers holding hands in silence. They hadn't come to admire price tags. They came to feel, at the center of the main hall mounted on a plain white wall. No frame, no security, no protective glass. Whispers at Dawn breathed. The blues still melted into gold. The softness still radiated from each brushstroke. But this time no one fought for it. No one raised a paddle. No one planned to lock it behind a vault door. People just stood there, eyes brimming, not with pity, but with the quiet recognition that somewhere, along the way, they had forgotten something important. Beneath the painting, a small handwritten note read, "Not for the rich, not for the poor, for those who still know how to feel." Amara wasn't present that day. In a small classroom behind the gallery, she sat with 5 children. One girl was drawing the sun in pastel yellows. A boy was mixing cobalt blue with deep violet, trying to recreate, as he described it, the color of wind before it rains. Amara smiled. She wasn't teaching them to draw beautifully. She was teaching them to feel. A photographer from a prestigious magazine once visited, asking to take her portrait in the artist's personal space. She declined. When asked why, Amara simply said, "I've been looked at enough. Now I want to look back." An old painting she had sold 10 years ago, for just a few €100, suddenly resurfaced at an auction in New York. This time, it was bought for $500 million by an anonymous buyer. Some whispered it was a king. Others said a brilliant programmer. Amara didn't care. When asked by the press, she replied with a quiet smile, "I don't need to know who owns my paintings. I only care who needs them." Hugo Reinhardt, the man who once mocked her as unfit to be in the room, tried to send an apology through a large donation. The letter was returned unopened. Celeste Dufontaine sent a handwritten plea, begging for a private meeting. No reply. Ethan and Sasha posted a vague status on social media in support of independent art, but the internet called it what it was, a shallow rebrand. In a world once ruled by spectacle and status, Amara Leigh became something no one could possess, and for that she became priceless. Eventually, a journalist was granted access to her classroom. He wasn't allowed to film nor conduct a long interview, just ask one question. He chose carefully. "Why did you tear the certificate?" Amara didn't answer right away. She looked up, her gaze drifting toward the window, where sunlight spilled across the art table. Then she spoke softly. "Because I don't paint for myself, I paint for those without certificates, without names, without a voice. I just do the only thing I know how, quietly placing pieces of my heart where they can be seen." Then she turned back to the child, mixing colors. "A little more olive green," she said, "like leaves just before they fall." A month later, a new painting appeared at the entrance of her second gallery, this one in São Paulo. It had no name, no price, only a small plaque beside it that read, "For those who still know how to feel pain and choose not to look away." People said Amara Leigh had redefined the meaning of art, but she never wanted to define anything. She only wanted the world to remember. Silence, when deep enough, can echo louder than diamonds. She didn't need to become a symbol, just a painter, with a brush, and a heart that could not be bought. Every morning she still walked past whispers at dawn. No, no touch. Just a glance, like greeting an old friend before continuing on. Light steps that made the whole world quiet, before the story fades. If you believe in stories that restore faith, that speak softly but strike deep, we invite you to stay with us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, we'd be honored to have you with us. Hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell, because every day we share moments that remind us there's beauty in quiet defiance, grace in truth, and sometimes the most powerful voices are the ones that never shouted.